I call the special February 12, 2015 Brattleboro Selectboard meeting to order. Has the meeting been properly warned?
Yes, it has.
Thank you, Jan. So we have tonight 3 items on the agenda. First item is presentation by the Pay-As-You-Throw Advisory Committee to talk about various steps that need to be taken in order to have our Pay-As-You-Throw system in place and operating as effectively as possible by July 1. The second is a discussion of some charter amendments that are going to be on the March 3 ballot, and then we'll briefly talk about our informational meeting. I want to deal with some scheduling issues before we call the first item. Dave, do you have to leave for Solid Waste Management District meeting?
At 6:30.
All right, so Dave is going to be leaving for Wyndham Solid Waste Management District meeting at 6:30, and I want to make sure to at least have a little bit of time to talk about the charter amendments when there's at least 4 of us here. So probably at 6:20, 6:15 or 6:20, we'll suspend the pay-as-you-throw item and briefly talk about the charter amendments if we're not done at that time with the pay-as-you-throw. Hopefully, but there's a lot to talk about. But if there's a timing issue, does everybody consent to proceeding that way? All right, that's okay.
Yep. Is the draft?
It is.
There it is.
It is. The other thing I'll do is, although it's not on the agenda, we will include, since we always do public participation, is there anybody who's in attendance who wants to speak to any item that's not on the agenda? Well, I want to congratulate Mr. Elwell, whose daughter Charlotte, with the St. Olaf's College Choir, performed at Carnegie Hall on Saturday night. So Mr. Elwell, along with his wife Wendy and his son Jonathan and his father, Corky Elwell, were able to go to Carnegie Hall to see his daughter perform there Saturday night. Congratulations.
Great college choruses perform.
Yes,
No
indeed.
small
Yep.
treat.
Thank you.
Sorry to embarrass you. No, I had to. So the next item on the agenda is our meeting with the Pay-As-You-Throw Advisory Committee. So what I'll note is that the structure of our process is a little bit different from what I've seen reported, and I just want to be clear. Our goal tonight is to present information about the pay-as-you-throw system in the broadest possible perspective, and then to provide detail about that as well. There may be voting tonight, but there may not be voting tonight. I don't think that's been finally decided yet, but our purpose right now is to use this as an informational meeting to distribute all information that we have available about the pay-as-you-throw system, and then we're going to make sure that whatever votes need to be taken are scheduled in a way that everything can be in place by the effective date of July 1. So I can't say we're going to be finalizing decisions today, but rather that information is going to be shared. We may or may not vote, I'm not sure yet. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Elwell, and then we're going to ask the Pay-As-You-Throw Committee to come up to the table to make their presentation.
Thank you. I would encourage the committee to come ahead up. My overview comments are going to be brief, but I do want to indicate that I know that you know from the work that the committee has done and the meetings that you've had previously with the board, that there has been a tremendous amount of effort invested in examining options for how to implement pay-as-you-throw in a manner that will be effective and meet the requirements of the state law, but in a way that hopefully will also meet with the approval of the affected residents here in Brattleboro. So That's gone on now for months. I've had the opportunity over the past month to participate in one evening meeting with the committee. But I think maybe more importantly in terms of the material that's in front of you tonight, to work with Patrick on making sure that we bring what we believe to be the complete story to you. So there's background information about how we got to where we are and what is required by the state legislation. And then importantly, piece by piece by piece, the results of the committee's efforts to identify the best way forward for the town. And summarized at the end of the backup materials with 8 specific recommendations for action that we understand, as you summarized, Mr. Chairman, that action may or may not be taken tonight, may well be taken on a future evening after you've processed what you hear. So with that as introduction, I'd ask Patrick to go through the items that are in the backup materials and the committee members to offer whatever information they think you need to hear.
Well, thank you very much, Peter. Good evening, everybody. I am Assistant Town Manager Patrick Moreland. I and John O'Connor have been working with the Pay-As-You-Throw Working Group since July of last year to help develop a plan for Brattleboro to transition into compliance with what's known as Act 148 of the Vermont Legislature, which is also known as Vermont's Universal Recycling Law. There are a number of, just to give you a sort of overview of what I'm going to try and accomplish, I'm going to walk us a little bit through the memo that I've developed, paying particular attention to specific recommendations of the committee. Probably going to introduce some folks who are in the audience at some point in time, and then sort of step back and see where the discussion goes and see what kind of questions or concerns are raised, and we'll take it from there. But I'll start with the discussion of Act 148. There are a number of things. It's a lengthy act, but it requires, for the first time, throughout the state of Vermont, not just as in Brattleboro, that recyclables are now mandatory, and that cans, bottles, paper, cardboard, and the like are now mandatory recyclables throughout the state of Vermont, effective July 1, 2015. It also requires, among other things, that there be parallel collection of recyclables, yard debris, and other food scraps at what are called facilities, which in this instance refers to transfer stations or solid waste facilities such as the Windham Solid Waste Management District here in Windham County. It requires haulers such as Triple T or Good Enough or Franklin or any of the other haulers to provide recycling collection to their customers. So it puts the burden, in fact, on the hauler to provide recycling and collection. Finally, there are a couple of requirements that are unique to municipalities, and these are the two that are going to be a principal discussion here. The first one is that municipalities adopt a plan for what's known as variable rate pricing. This has been the subject of much discussion amongst the committee. We've met nearly every 2 weeks, I would guess, since last July. And the recommendations are largely addressing the issues of variable rate pricing. There is a second requirement that has been less committee work and more staff work, which is for parallel collection. Parallel collection means for a municipality that anywhere we offer solid waste collection, be that in a park, be that on Main Street, or be that in the halls of the municipal center, that we must simultaneously provide recycling collection at that location. So I'll talk a little bit after the variable rate discussion, a little bit about our plan for parallel collection, but those are some of the highlights of Act 148. To begin with, I think I'd like to draw your attention to what is defined in the packet as Attachment A. Attachment A being a budget for the solid waste fund. And what I'd like to just acknowledge is John O'Connor, our finance director, has recommended and that we establish the solid waste fund, and that we take all of the costs associated with solid waste, be they tipping, be they collections, be they the assessment from Wyndham Solid Waste Management District, et cetera, and we place those in the solid waste fund. The fund shall have as revenue, revenue from bags, sales of containers, and of course a transfer into the general fund. And we'll talk a little bit about how those things work when we talk about the price of the bags. But I just wanted to sort of highlight that and bring that to your attention. The committee thought long and hard about what is sometimes called the proxy. That being, what is the item that you purchase that allows you to pay for the disposal of your solid waste? There are a number of options that other communities have existed, and I believe Moss has made contact with nearly every community who is making use of a pay-as-you-throw system in the tri-state area. Talked to a variety of them about their experiences and their use of either stickers or bands or bags. And at a consequence, or as a conclusion of that discussion, along with the rest of the committee is recommending the use of bags, and specifically two sizes of bags, roughly a 15-gallon bag and a 32-gallon bag, that they be color-coded such that they each have a separate color, and that they include drawstring enclosures at the top. And specifically, their recommendation is that we do not use bands or stickers. So it's a very specific recommendation. I'll just sort of try and highlight some of the discussion and the thinking behind this. I know some of this material we've kind of gone over in the past, but probably good to discuss it again. One of the chief benefits of utilizing bags as opposed to bags or stickers is that it is immediately observable by anyone whether somebody is in compliance or not. So if you're the hauler and you're driving along and you get to a curbside location, I reach down, do I need to fumble around and see if we've got the right piece of information? No, I'm actually moving along pretty quickly because I can see that this color-coded bag with the emblem of the town of Brattleboro on it is right there and ready to go. So it provides for easy monitoring and supportive enforcement activities. And secondly, because it provides the opportunity for neighbors and strangers to be able to easily see, hey, I can see that guy over there is participating, I can see this guy over here is participating, I want to make sure that I'm participating, and everyone's going to know it if I'm not. So the strong recommendation from this committee would be for bags in two sizes, of two colors, with drawstring enclosures, and to have those at, excuse me, 15 and 32 gallons. Moving along, the committee spent many a meeting and many a discussion going over a pricing model that Moss Kaler developed that was quite extensive, and it allowed for estimations of diverted trash, estimations of increased recycling, estimations of increased composting, estimations, all of which were designed to help us identify roughly how many bags we think we were going to sell and roughly how much material was going to be in each of those bags. This helped us to arrive at a recommendation, and the recommendation is simply this, that a large bag sell for $3 and that a small bag sell for $2. And there are a couple of reasons why this is favorable. The first is that we believe it complies with the law. The law requires that we at least set a variable rate pricing system that covers the cost of tipping fees and covers the cost of collecting solid waste. It does not oblige us to cover the cost of district assessment or the collection of compostables or the collection of recycling. It is strictly for solid waste, tipping fees, and the collection of solid waste. So setting the price at $2 and $3 based on the estimated number of bags and based on the volume of material, we're going to be able to raise enough money to comply with the law. The second is out of a desire to achieve parity with the surrounding communities. There are other communities nearby that have already implemented pay-as-you-throw. Vernon, Hinsdale, and there are others a little further out, Greenfield. By setting the price at a point of sort of stasis with the surrounding community, we avoid a system where their trash is coming to us or our trash is coming to them. The other situation we were trying to avoid is if we set the price so as to raise more revenue and offset more costs, we may find ourselves in a situation where the citizens essentially reject the program. If a bag costs you $10, that's just going to be, I think, rejected outright. And so there was a desire to keep the bags in close parity with the surrounding communities and to keep them as affordable as possible while at the same time complying with the law. We recognized early on and discussed, I think at numerous occasions, the challenge that this transition was going to provide, particularly for lower income families or senior citizens, somebody who might be on a fixed income. Things that have otherwise been paid for either in your rent or in your property taxes are now you're going to have to pay directly. And so this could provide a challenge for some households. And one of the ways that we are suggesting that we respond to this is when bags are sold in supermarkets, for example, they're going to be sold in packets of 5 or 10. That may be financially challenging, as that could be $10 or $15 for a household, and that may be beyond someone's means. So our recommendation is that the municipality provide sale of individual bags here at the Municipal Center, in the Treasurer's Office, and across the street at the Gibson and Aiken Center in the Rec and Parks office, so that they're in close proximity to the Senior Center. And if somebody is financially challenged, they have a location where they can buy just one bag and help them get through that week. So that's another recommendation from the committee. Next thing up, I'd like to talk a little bit about the request for proposals that was put out in public back in November. The town solicited prices from bag manufacturing outfits, and with that we asked for the potential for optional prices for a series of additional services. Services that would include inventory and distribution control, and also potentially public education. We received a total of 4 bids, and I guess I'd like to talk about this in a couple of distinct pieces. And the first piece is strictly about the price of the bags themselves. We received 4 bids. Included in your packet is a bit of an analysis from John O'Connor about these bag prices. And John, if you wouldn't mind just touching upon what we discovered there, I think that would be helpful.
Okay, thank you, Patrick. So included in the packet, attachment B, is a memo that kind of outlines what we did. As Patrick said, we did issue a request for proposal, and we received bids from 4 different companies for providing bags. 2 of the companies only provided bags and no distribution services and no education services. The price of the small bags ranged from 13.9 cents to 18.97 cents. Waste Zero was the lowest cost provider of the small bag. The large bags ranged from 20.5 cents to 29.964 cents. And again, Waste Zero was the lowest bidder for the large bags. We then looked at the bag prices with the distribution charges included. The distribution charges include getting the bags distributed to the vendors, collecting from the vendors, doing all the accounting related to that, maintaining the inventory, so a whole series of services related to distribution. And again, we looked at, there were only 2 bidders that said they would provide that service, Waste Zero and Boxes and Bags Unlimited. And Waste Zero's prices for bags plus distribution, for the small bag was 2.1 cents less, and for the large bag was 3.62 cents lower. So all in all, we came to the conclusion that from a pricing standpoint, Waste Zero certainly provided the lowest cost alternative for the town of Brattleboro.
Thank you, John. So as a result of that analysis, I think it's very clear that the committee has unanimously recommended that we begin working with Waste Zero for drawstring bags in 2 sizes. But I want to touch a little bit further on what John was referring to in terms of the inventory and distribution services as a separate piece of work. Early on in the process, when we were working with Moss and going through and sort of vetting that pricing spreadsheet, there was a placeholder that we had for what we called at the time just program management. And in a nutshell, that was a placeholder that we had built into the spreadsheet for the cost of the sort of behind-the-scenes services. That is, once the bags are produced, they need to be somewhere, they need to get to retail locations, there needs to be a process of accounting for that, that product needs to be insured, there needs to be a system of controls over that. And we had a cell and we put in a basic number of $25,000, which we knew to be quite low, because as we began to discuss the services that would be involved in that, it was pretty easy to see the way in which these services would add up. If the municipality, for example, was to try and provide the inventory and distribution services, first and foremost, we would need a staff person. Somebody probably not full-time, but probably part-time. And that person would need to be able to work from, we go to the storage area, we get ourselves cases of bags. I got to take 6 over to Price Chopper and 6 over to Hannaford's and 3 over to the co-op, etc. They've got to have a vehicle and a dolly. They've got to get there. They've got to conduct retail relations, so they've got to be available to Hannaford's, Price Chopper, etc., such that when they call up and say, hey, we had a run on bags and we need new inventory and we're running low, somebody needs to be able to answer that call, be available for that request, and provide that service. And as John and I sort of started beating around the idea of, okay, what would be the costs associated with that, we just sort of left a placeholder there of $25,000, but I think it's fair to say that had we truly continued going down that road and developing the costs that would be associated with that management of inventory and distribution, that number would likely have risen and potentially risen significantly. So, as we're examining the bids that come back from the RFP that we issued, we began to take a look at the 2 companies that provided bids for inventory and distribution control, and they did so in a manner which was a couple of cents per bag. They just added it on. At the estimated bag sales that Brattleboro can anticipate at this time, at least that we've tentatively said we think is realistic, of 77,000 small bags and 77,000 large bags, that would mean that at the prices quoted from Waste Zero, the cost for this inventory and distribution service would be something like half of what we had budgeted for. So it became really clear to us that there would be an efficiency or a cost savings or a economy of scale by working with a private company that does this work exclusively. And so as a consequence of that, as a consequence of the funds that would be saved as a result of this, we would recommend that the town make use of option B for the retail inventory, distribution, and invoicing services provided by Waste Zero. Now, also in your packet is a series of materials provided to us by Waste Zero that include a sample contract, include sample agreements between Waste Zero and retailers, include some pictures of bags, etc., include some examples of the sorts of accounting and financial materials that the company would provide to a participating community. And so we've included in that for your ability to take a look at that and perhaps ask some questions of it. I would also like to point out that there is a gentleman in the audience with us tonight. In the back, his name is Steve Lasauskas. He is Vice President of Waste Zero and can speak, not just yet, but probably in a little while, answer any questions about the services that his company can provide, how they do it, why they're able to do it at the prices that they're able to do, and sort of expand upon that whole piece. So the last thing I think I would say about the RFP is that Waste Zero also included a price for sort of public education support. The committee reviewed and considered it, found it to be a nice example, but after much additional discussion, are going to recommend that the public education and program implementation be handled locally, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. So they are not recommending at this point in time that we go with option C from Waste Zero, and that's noted in the recommendations. Next, I'd like to talk just briefly, because I know it's something that is of interest to everybody, is where am I going to be able to buy these things? If we go with bags and we have retail locations that are going to sell bags, where are those locations going to be? And thanks in part to much of the footwork from Moss Kaler over the last couple of months, we have reached out to and had fairly detailed communication with the retail locations listed in the memo here, with Price Chopper, Cumberland Farms, Fireside, True Value, Brattleboro Food Co-op, Hannaford's, and Brown and Roberts. They have each agreed in principle that they would sell the bags and do so at face value. One thing to point out is that given the structure, the relationship between the municipality and between Waste Zero, if we were to be working with Waste Zero, and between the retailer, the way that typically works is an agreement is structured between Waste Zero and the retailer. So these are sort of tentative, but we know that they're interested and willing to sell. If there are others, we can certainly add them. There's nobody that should be excluded from this as long as they're able to provide the product, maintain inventory, and sell it at face value. So the opportunity will be there for other retail institutions. If they wish to participate, they certainly can. So just trying to move along a little bit, we spent, the committee spent as a group, several meetings, probably several months worth of meetings, examining Brattleboro's Chapter 7 to the Code of Ordinances and making some changes that we now collectively recommend that the board consider. In a nutshell, I think you can summarize these changes in a couple of different ways. We have added an article that describes variable rate pricing. We have recommended the removal of the section known as regulations and are now preferring that section, which had previously described, for example, which recyclables are mandated, that section now be covered in what we will call a program description, and that program description be taken out of the ordinance and maintained as a separate document approved by the board, made available in pamphlet format and made available on our municipal website, such that it can be adjusted with a little bit more ease and frequency, because some of the things we've recognized is that over the years, recycling changes, and we haven't always kept up with maintaining our ordinances to keep up with that. So in addition to those changes, there's been some definitions added, particularly around the issue of composting. There's been some definitions deleted that we actually found were probably remnants from earlier version of the ordinance. And in many significant ways, we have incorporated, wherever recycling is discussed, the issue of composting is now being discussed. So Brattleboro, as you know, has a really unique curbside composting program. thanks to our partnership with Triple T, and that is now discussed at length in the ordinance and in a similar manner as the recycling is discussed. And then lastly, before I sort of talk to my friends here and ask them if I'm missing out on anything, we would like to make a recommendation about program implementation, public education, and enforcement support. As you know, we mentioned a little while ago, Waste Zero offered to provide some enhanced public education. I think it was a worthwhile proposal, but separate from that, the committee had asked Moss to examine his potential for developing a public education program implementation and enforcement support. And the reason I think for asking Moss is pretty clear. Moss served the town of Brattleboro well in years past, particularly during our previous transition to mandated recyclables, where he helped us. He helped working with the ordinance back then. He helped with education to the public about what materials are going to be recycled, how they would be recycled, where they would be recycled, etc. Helped work with Triple T on recycling. He further worked with the town of Brattleboro when we put in place the curbside composting program, and again served the community by helping to get that program off the ground, helping to get the materials needed into the hands of the citizens in terms of the composting buckets, in terms of the education that they needed to understand in order to be able to utilize the program. And so it seems natural and a worthwhile recommendation that the town consider engaging Moss Kaler once again to really complete program implementation and to oversee and implement some of the public education work that we know needs to occur. We would be there's a proposal in the back of the packet from Moss. It describes a series of activities that we have considered and believe are probably the right approach. We need somebody who will be helping to develop the program description document and to be making sure that that is up and available on the website. We would be mailing this information out to everybody townwide in Brattleboro, and somebody needs to be the person to organize and facilitate that work. We need somebody we believe, to organize and facilitate public meetings, both general public meetings that will likely take place at a school, but then also to continue the work that Moss has really been doing since the beginning of January, meeting with individual constituency groups that are each going to be facing pay-as-you-throw with a slightly different experience and a slightly different reaction. And so these sort of special interest groups have, and I believe will continue to include, the local landlord group, a variety of social services agencies, some neighborhood associations, including the Frost and Elliott and Elm Triangle Association. The condominium associations are particularly, they're an interesting example, and Moss has been working with them to engage them and to help them to understand what some of their experiences may be so that they can help to make some decisions for themselves, as well as the mobile home park, the Wyndham and Windsor Housing Trust, the Brattleboro Housing Authority, any of these sorts of larger locations that have multiple housing units where folks are going to have perhaps what is a unique experience that's a little bit different than just your single family home. And so Moss has been very active in terms of reaching out to them, meeting with their representatives and helping them to understand where we think this program is going, which is one of the reasons why it's good to get some of these decisions in the hopper so that we can finalize and begin to sort of make sure that they now understand the specifics of the program and that we begin to understand some of the challenges that they may face and can help them to work through those. Moss would also be it just makes sense, I think, to the committee that Moss would also be the person who would help to, that would help Brattleboro to really ramp up its recycling and composting program. He helped to get these programs off the ground in the first place, and I think it's pretty clear to see that pay-as-you-throw is a program designed to allow you to take some measure of control over your solid waste expenses. And that measure of control is exerted by being able to make use of recycling and composting, each of which can be processed at a much lower cost than solid waste. So as we implement pay-as-you-throw, it's anticipated that curbside composting is really going to take off. We need somebody who's going to be able to help us to disseminate that information, to help connect people with composting, the buckets, as they call them. Moss has done this work for us in the past, and we think he's the right person to help us to do this in the future. He would also obviously be making use of printed, radio, TV, all sorts of media activities to be able to get the word out and to make sure that it's an issue that is covered both on the radio and in the newspaper. And so we really think Moss would be the right person for that. And one of the other things that Moss has helped us with in the past, and we think he would be good at helping in pay-as-you-throw, is to be able to provide that sort of nurturing enforcement support. We're going to do this major transition, and some folks are going to get it and get it right away, and they're going to be on it. Some folks are not. When those folks begin to identify themselves and begin to recognize that, hey, their trash isn't getting picked up, and what's going on here, and what am I doing wrong, we've got somebody who can be dispatched to the scene, who can work with that particular property owner, who can talk to them and help them to understand the requirements of the program so that they can get, that they can come into compliance and avoid any more strict enforcement activities. Really think it makes sense for this community to walk gently into this program, and we think that that can be accomplished by having somebody with Moss's strengths and talents engaged. So the committee would be recommending a couple of things here. One, that we engage the services of Moss. There is specifically discussion in the memo here indicating about a 10-month engagement at roughly $21,250. And further, I think we haven't met in a little while to discuss pay-as-you-throw, but Moss has been active and eager in really beginning to engage and liaise to the surrounding interest groups and community groups, probably beginning at around the beginning of January. So it would be our recommendation, if it was the board's pleasure, that if we agree that we want to engage his services, that we do so, and we do so beginning January 1. That would be staff's recommendation. So before we go into depth or start to seek some input maybe from Steve about some of the services that Waste Zero might provide, am I missing anything from the committee? Is there anything you guys would like to add, or any areas of concern? No. Moss?
I was just, Bob Spencer, Wyndham Solid Waste, point out there's another regulatory piece of this. It's an ordinance that Wyndham Solid Waste is now developing on behalf of our member communities, which is required by the state to enforce the variable rate pricing program by the hauling industry.
Just given that we have one television camera, I would ask people to sit back while somebody is talking.
I'll stand up.
So that they can,
Thanks,
the person
Dave.
who's talking can be seen.
No, thank you. So we are in parallel and with the town's ordinance we'll start our public hearing phase within a month for our ordinance, which would require that all haulers operating within Windham County register with the districts and give proof they're registered with the state, which they have to do, and then provide evidence they have a variable rate pricing program. We're not charging for the registration, it's just a one-page form, but we did review the two ordinances to make sure they're consistent. The other piece of this is that we've already worked with Moss to coordinate the public education program because we do our own public education and outreach for recycling. We've met quite a few times and are sharing literature and make sure we have consistent messaging throughout the district and in the town. Tomorrow I had the opportunity to meet, thank you Peter Elwell, coming over to see our facilities at the district, along with Patrick I think, and show where these materials are all processed, how we bale them and market them. Brattleboro is a big part of our recycling tonnage, and we want to make sure you understand how that's integrated. We also provide the composting services for the curbside program, as well as the leaf and yard waste program, which is in the spring and the fall. So we're quite integrated functionally. Also, I just wanted to point out, I mentioned this to Dave before the meeting started, that I live in Vernon. We started pay-as-you-throw July 1 with Triple T, and same bag pricing, $3 for 32 gallon, $2 for the 15 gallon. And as at the 6-month mark at the end of December, we were within $2,000 of covering all our expenses for the program. We were kind of lucky in terms of estimating the number of bags sold, but it worked out very well. Now, obviously, it's a different town, more population density, but Triple T, our tonnage dropped by 50% in town of trash once we implemented the program. Triple D was offering every other week collection of recyclables when we started the program at no additional cost to the town. They voluntarily increased to weekly collection because the trash volume was down so much. So we now have weekly collection at the same price they quoted us. And so again, we're having a very good relationship with this same hauler you have. So that's all.
Just briefly, I think we should note that the committee is made up of citizens, myself, and Moss, and Carl Hirth, who's not here, who have all been involved in solid waste one way and another for a long time. Peter being a resident of Brattleboro and working with Triple T, and Bob being not a resident of Brattleboro, but a vital member of the committee because of being involved with the solid waste district.
We won't hold that against you, Bob.
Okay, thank you.
You all know us all anyway,
Yeah.
but I thought I'd say that.
Well, and just for the folks out in television land, 2 of these board members are the representatives to Windham Solid Waste District, John and Dave Scholes.
We don't have tons of time. We should get to questions or whatever.
If we can get to questions, if the board is inclined, I think it might be worthwhile to just ask Mr. Lasauskas perhaps to speak for just a couple of minutes about the inventory and distribution services and maybe why they're able to provide the services at the cost that they can, A, and B, maybe just to speak a little bit about the quality of the services and what you think Brattleboro will experience should we choose to participate with you in that way. So if you couldn't maybe come to the microphone.
Sit in the end chair.
Well, I think the camera can get him right
Okay,
there, and the
all right.
microphone is probably not a bad way either.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. Steve Lasauskas, Vice President at Waste Zero. We are the nation's largest pay-as-you-throw provider. We partner with over 800 cities and towns nationally on their waste reduction programs and are flattered to be under the board's consideration for partnership with the town and look forward to potentially having the opportunity to work with you. The retail store distribution program, that's our name for it, encompasses everything from when the bags are manufactured to when they actually get into residents' hands. So we are the bag manufacturer, we're an American manufacturer, source all our raw materials to the US, source all our equipment to the US, and everything down to the car I drive. I receive a different mileage reimbursement if it's an American-made car versus a foreign-made car. Our motive, the way our focus as a company, we're a benefit corporation, so we provide equal weight to the social mission that I'll talk about in a second, as well as our corporate mission. That is to create domestic prosperity, employing more people through recycling and creating jobs there, helping cities and towns save money. So what we do when we manufacture here, warehouses on the East Coast, your bags will go to 2 of them. So once they're manufactured, they'll go to 2 different warehouses that are located in different weather patterns and are subject to different risks. So if, for instance, there is a hurricane, we want to make sure that you don't have bag shortage at any point in time because your residents will still generate trash. So our retail store distribution program starts from the moment they're manufactured to where they are shipped. So we will ship to 2 of our 4 warehouses. We could do a third if necessary. Those warehouses are bonded and insured. We know which bag goes into which case goes into what pallet goes under what truck, where those trucks are at all times, when they arrive at the warehouses, when they're unloaded off the warehouses, where they are in the warehouses, and then where they are when they're being delivered by FedEx signature control to the individual stores. So we'll handle as the store calls and says, Hannaford says we need 10 cases of bags, we take that order, we make sure they get those bags, usually within the week they order. If they order by Tuesday, they'll get it by Thursday. So we'll make sure they get those bags, and we have chain of custody all the way through to make sure that the bags that are the town's bags are, you have that level of transparency to know not only where the bags are, but we can actually tell you who made them, what time they were made, on what bag line. We have that degree of integration. Then that philosophy, that mindset of giving you the transparency you need to feel comfortable also moves over onto the accounting side. So every store that orders bags, we take those orders, we do your revenue accounting and also accounts receivable and soft collection when necessary. We are not one of those collection folks. We do the nice version of collection. Look, it's your money, so we do collect it on your behalf. So every month you will receive a list of all the stores that ordered bags by the size, the revenue you should expect from each size, rolled up for the store. So you have Hannaford ordered 10 cases of large and 5 cases of small. 10 cases of large times $3 per bag equals maybe $6,000. And then the same thing on the small. And then we release the money from a bank account that we've opened on your behalf. So the money always, as it's deposited, as Hannaford pays us, hopefully quickly after they receive the bags, we put that in your bank account, release that with the internal control report, the accounting report, that then goes to, I presume, Mr. O'Connor's office to be reconciled, so you can have the account reconciliation, you have full visibility throughout. So you can see the bags as they're made, as they're shipped, as they're stored, as they're finally shipped to final destination. You can see the money flow as well. And it's a deep, this is what we do. So we're pretty deep in terms of the level of internal control, the level of reporting, and we're happy to work with you to customize any of that as necessary. But we found that cities and towns tend to, we go a little further than is necessary, but we'd rather do that than be on the other side. Was that responsive?
That was perfect.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I guess what I would suggest now is maybe Moss can tell us a little bit about the anticipated rollout in education and enforcement, which is probably the last piece of, and then, unless you want to ask questions first.
No, then we'll do that, and then I have questions
Yeah.
for Waste Zero about that.
Totally. So Moss, if you can just give us an overview, 3 or 5 minutes worth of rollout and education enforcement, so that we've got the whole picture, and that'll probably leave us for questions.
Sure. As Patrick mentioned, I'd previously been under contract with the town, and that went through the end of the year, December 31st. And I knew that the select board wanted to have pay-as-you-throw enacted as soon as possible, no later than July 1st. And so I felt that it was both necessary, prudent, and my desire to continue working with the anticipation and the desire and the hope that the town would contract with me, continuing on through the beginning of pay-as-you-throw. So I've not hesitated from the first of the year, and in fact, with the new year, I've probably been redoubling my efforts, knowing that the timeline we're facing and that certain things need to fall in line for pay-as-you-throw to start on any one particular date. And so I've been having a series of meetings both with the pay-as-you-throw committee and with the select board and with community organizations such as the Continuum of Care, the Flat Street, Elliott Street, Triangle Group, Elm Street, Arbor Hill condominiums, been in communication with Morningside Commons condominiums, have a meeting coming up with the Tri-Park, and Peter and I met just this week with the Brattleboro Housing Authority, and with their properties, they face they have a lot of anxieties around pay-as-you-throw, and I'm prepared to help them and their staff, both their maintenance staff and their administrative staff, in meeting with their population, their residents, and in trying to make pay-as-you-throw as seamless and easy a transition for their residents as possible. And the same goes with Windsor Housing Trust, Connie Snow and Deb Zach. I'll be meeting with them in about a week. I've been working quite a bit this month, realizing that the intention is to have a townwide mailing go out that not only informs people about pay-as-you-throw is coming on such and such a date or no later than such and such a date, but listing the specifics of the pay-as-you-throw program, the sizes of the bags, the cost of the bags, where you can buy the bags, but also seeing this as an opportunity to get more information in their hands that redoubles our efforts on recycling information to our residents and our citizens, composting and curbside composting, as well as there'll be information about what to do with hazardous waste, what to do with bulky waste, construction and demolition debris, tires, appliances. So there'll be a lot of information that might be on Wyndham Solid Waste Management's website that people have in their hands in one pamphlet. I'm envisioning a pamphlet that's 8.5 by 11 stapled together, and that we'll be able to use for, let's say, a year or two or perhaps more before it becomes outdated. The information that would be specific about the start of pay-as-you-throw would be in a loose sheet that would be packaged in the middle, so you could take that out. That would be very specific about this is what's going to happen in the next couple months that you need to know. I'll be working with Peter Gaskell and Triple T and his drivers about enforcement and challenges they're going to find. I'll ride with the truck when we start the curbside compost pickup and help the drivers with any challenges they might see and see them firsthand. I'll do some weighing of bags that we did prior this last fall in both Brattleboro and surrounding communities. And I expect that there will be, I have my fingers crossed it'll be very little, but I suspect there'll be some notifications to the town or directly to me or Triple T or Patrick or whatever of illegal dumping. And I would like to help the town take control of that and try to both educate and, if necessary, facilitate enforcement of our illegal dumping ordinance. And I'll stop right there. So.
Excellent. That's
Is
a
that
nice
3 to 5
overview.
minutes?
Yeah.
6
Thank you.
minutes?
That's excellent. So I think what we'll start with is questions from the board for anybody who's spoken or anybody who might have any information to share. And then I think we'll take a brief pause in 5 minutes quickly to deal with the charter amendment issues because Dave's going to be leaving and there's some things we want to talk about before he goes. And then we'll resume this discussion if there's any more to be had. So anybody who's got any questions, direct them to anybody who they want to talk.
I had a question. I don't know if the message got to Steve about bringing I asked if I could see the educational things that Waste Zero did. I was really interested.
Yes, ma'am. I have copies of several things that I'll walk you
great.
through if that's helpful.
Yes, thank you.
And I have 10 copies of each. But these two documents represent overviews of what we'll do, two different views. One's a little bit more internal to the mechanisms, and another is why
Good.
we do different aspects of
Okay.
it. So 10 copies of that. These tend to be mailers.
Okay.
This represents, this is a package of, I think, 5 or 7 documents. So
Okay.
these are the pre-implementation mailers we'll send out to folks.
Okay.
So some are 11 by 8.5 by 11. These happen to be 5 by 7 glossies for you. There's one package for each member of the board.
Thank you.
And then several for members of the public.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
And then, I apologize to everybody back there. And then here are printouts of the website. Obviously, they
Great.
look better than this, but it's a printout of the
Right.
website, so I'm happy to give you those websites.
Thank you.
But we do pre-launch communications, both when we do it electronically as well as social media, in a substantial in-person presence. We tend to like to reach people on an individual basis, so we do have a lot of literature that we use, but we tend to emphasize the personal, because solid waste and recycling tend to be personal things we use.
Thank you.
Most welcome.
Pass it on. What, can I ask another question to
Go
somebody?
ahead,
I don't know
Kate.
who
Yeah, you
to-
just go, you have the floor for a little while.
I don't know who to ask this to. How does enforcement, work in other towns? You know, or how does it work now, in Brattleboro, if somebody, throws something wrong away?
Sure. Typically, enforcement is for, not typically, but in Chapter 7 of our ordinance, which is the solid waste chapter, enforcement falls to the responsibility of the town manager's office. Enforcement usually takes place in a number of different ways, and it takes place differently depending upon the type of violator. So, for example, somebody who is served by the curbside program, who, for example, might include too many recyclables in a bag of solid waste. What will happen is Triple T will come along and they'll say, hey, here's a bag of trash, but unfortunately it's chock full of cans and bottles, and they will leave that at the curbside and put a sticker on it. We will make note of, and we share a spreadsheet with them of violators of the program, and we have in the ordinance already the threat of cessation of service for curbside that occasionally requires the town manager to go out and inspect the situation and be the ultimate sort of arbitrator as to, is this a bag full of recyclables? The person says no, and Triple T says yes, and somebody ultimately needs to be the person to go out there. And that responsibility falls to the town manager's office or its assigned agent.
So we see no changes in the way things will be enforced. It's going to be that same way.
Typically, it's going to be the same way. I think based upon the experience of having put in place other significant changes in the past, be they when we first transitioned to mandated recyclables or when we created the curbside compost program, what we realized is probably in the first 6 months, and I think Moss could probably speak to this, or Jane, from actually having participated in this, is that over that first couple of months, you're busy in terms of enforcement. You're getting out there and you're probably riding with the trucks and meeting with people who are struggling to sort of get it right a lot.
Okay.
Whereas I can say a year or so down the road, we're not really having problems with recyclables in the trash. It just doesn't come up very often.
Do you know how many times anybody in the town manager's office has ever gone out and looked at a trash bag?
I wouldn't know total numbers, but I can tell you that in the time that I've worked for the town of Brattleboro, which is since August of 2011, it's taken place 2 times.
Okay. And how many households do we pick trash up for in the town?
Around 4,000.
A lot.
Around 4,000
Around
signals.
4,000.
Yeah.
Okay, so 4,000 households and the town managers had to go out twice. Okay.
But that is under a period of time when we're operating on with a program which is well in place and,
Right.
and organized, one which is sort of reached maturity. Moss, I don't know if maybe you could speak a little bit to.
When Cindy and I were hired by the town to increase the recycling rate, a large component of that was enforcing our mandatory recycling ordinance that for basically 20 years had never been enforced. And Brattleboro's recycling rate was woefully low. And the drivers could tell you, or almost anybody who handled a number of trash bags down the street could tell you there was a lot of bags that had a lot of recycling in it. The ordinance was rewritten at that time, and the enforcement procedure that came up with, and it's continuing today, is that the drivers, if they detect that a bag is just chock full of recyclables, they will leave it at the curb and they'll put a violation sticker on it, and they'll check the box that says it contains recyclables. They'll record that address on a piece of paper in their truck, and they'll get that information to Sean at Triple T, who puts it in a database that's shared with the town. When that enforcement was going strong, there were many, many addresses that had a lot of recycling in their trash, and they were repeat offenders. And the ordinance is written such that if any single address has a violation of 3 times in a rolling 2-month period, they receive a letter from the town that their trash service is going to be suspended. And during that period when there was strong enforcement, Barb Sondag was town manager at the time. I think she dealt quite often, and way more than twice, not necessarily going to someone's house, but with talking to people and saying, you violated X number of times in a 2-month period, and until you can show the town that you're going to comply with the mandatory recycling ordinance, you're losing your trash service. And Callista could tell you as well, because she's really the point person.
So there is, my point is there's a mechanism in place.
Yes,
Okay.
yes,
All
there
right.
is.
What I need to do is to suspend this discussion about the pay-as-you-throw program briefly. Steve, thanks for standing up, and we'll call on you as soon as we begin the discussion again. We're now going to briefly call the next item on the agenda before returning to it later, which is the charter amendments. And what I'm going to do is as follows. In the select board binder are the following materials relating to the charter amendments. First, the language of the proposed amendments as they're going to appear on the March 3 ballot. Second, there is a proposed Brattleboro Charter Amendment fact sheet that I prepared, and that's been included in the select board materials for consideration by the board. And then there are 2 memos that were prepared by the town attorney relating to issues that arise in connection with the charter amendment proposals, one relating to the youth vote and one relating to the select board's authority to distribute informational material. Particularly for discussion this evening is the proposed Brattleboro Charter Amendment fact sheet. And my inquiry to the select board members is whether any of the board members who are here, having now received this fact sheet and had a chance to review it, whether generally you've got any comments or suggestions about things that should be changed, and then second, what's your views about how it should be distributed? And so I'll take the first one first. Does anybody on the board, now having had a chance to read and review this fact sheet, have any comments or suggestions about it? Anything you'd like to see changed? Any concerns you have about any of the information that's being distributed in the fact sheet?
No, I think you hit it all.
Hearing none, then the next question is how we would go about distributing it. And there are two primary alternatives. One of them, well, three. One of the alternatives is just making it available to the press. I've started seeing letters to the editor. There was a letter to the editor in the Reformer today.
Very good.
There's another letter to the editor that I've seen distributed from a number of other people. And certainly I think that the proposed, that this proposed charter amendment fact sheet should be distributed through the press, that being the Reformer, the Commons, Brattleboro, and to the radio stations if they're interested. The second alternative is to distribute it some other way, which could include mailing.
The mass mailing.
It could include just doing it as a handout to be available. And the third alternative might involve speaking, for example, to the radio about it, if they're interested in speaking with anybody from the select board about these positions. So I'm interested to hear what everybody's views are about that. We only have 4 members of the select board here at this point. I think we're only going to have 4 on Tuesday, but pretty soon we're only going to have 3 here tonight. And at this point, I just want to get a sense of what is the board members' pleasure. So first, in terms of distributing this to the Reformer and Brattleboro and the Commons, anybody have any concerns with proceeding in that way?
No.
All right. And then I take it that similarly, if we're going to reach out to any members of the press, the radio, that's also acceptable?
Yeah.
All right. And then one alternative was mailing it out. Another alternative was making copies so they can be available. What is anybody's view about that issue?
I think copies are fine, and just making them available here at the municipal center. I don't think a mass mailing is really going to be required. I mean, that's just my opinion.
No, I kind of see it the same way, more for just because I don't want to pay for the mailing.
It's
I don't want
$2,000.
to see us spending money on it.
Right.
But I hadn't even, until like a minute ago, it dawned on me that sending a mailing around might actually get a lot more people out, aware of what's going on and out to vote. And since everybody would know that this is going on, whether they watch us on TV or not, or don't read the paper, so if there was a sentiment toward doing it, I would support it. But I think we can dispense it pretty broadly on our own.
I think so.
Especially if we're active and, if we take it with us and hand it to people. Stack it up at the chair.
Your thoughts, Kate?
My thoughts, yeah, I mean, I think there's, the worry I have is spending the money, but on the flip side, we need to get it out, and it does generate, if somebody gets something in the mail, then you all of a sudden know about something that you didn't know about. So I think that's, for me, what we have to weigh, and I don't know how much it costs to do something like this.
1,700.
But Peter?
It'll cost a little more than that. Our estimate is $2,600.
Yeah.
If you decide that you'd like to proceed with the mailing, and it would go to every residential address in Brattleboro, if you would like to proceed with that, my recommendation to you would be that you authorize us to proceed with such a mailing at a cost of not to exceed $3,000, so we've got a little bit of play there if there are some unanticipated costs. We think it'll come in around $2,600.
Where would the money come from?
Come from the operating budget.
Yeah, it's a
The
small
operating
enough
budget.
number that there'll be offsetting savings elsewhere. It's obviously an unbudgeted expense, but it's one we can absorb.
Right.
So, I think that there's benefits to distributing it by mail. I think that it will notify people who are not otherwise engaged that the issue's unfolding. I'm not really sure how printing it for distribution is going to result in its distribution.
there's not really a lot of places where handbills are picked up, and we're not going to be going around handing them out. So printing them up is an alternative, but I'm not sure how much they're going to get used unless we're handing them out beyond the polling places, and where we're allowed to hand them out on election day, which is then a little bit late. The cost, I believe, if it's over $1,000, we need to make reporting to the state that we've spent that money to distribute information in relation to a ballot item. I think what we'll do for now, rather than taking a vote on whether to mail and whether to hand out, is leave that for Tuesday. Having now discussed this, is there anything else that anybody on the board wants to say about any of those issues? I guess everybody's comfortable, did I say, with if we wind up on the radio talking about
Oh,
it?
yes.
All right. So, one second. So, if there's nothing else from the board, then anybody who's in attendance have got anything to say about that? Jane?
Okay. Yes, I'm really glad you're seeking to put put the select board's ideas before the town, and I think it's gonna be a great way to engage people in what might otherwise be a less than exciting municipal election. And if there are going to be the usual forums, candidate forums, which I don't know whether there are, that would be a place where the forums could also include the issues. And there may be community volunteers who agree with you and might like to help hand out. So those would be my thoughts.
Thank you. Dora?
Dora Googleless, Brattleboro. Well, first of all, reading through this, the very first one refers to town meetings. We don't have town meeting. We have representative town meeting. Town meeting is actually election day, so I would suggest that gets corrected. This is really chock full of adjectives and adverbs. I generally, as a rule, go through everything I write and take out all the adjectives and adverbs. The responsibility of the select board is to educate, and I don't have a problem with putting out a statement about what things mean. But a lot of this is opinion, and that's fine if you guys want to decide to put that out there as opinion. But I said a few weeks ago, and I'll say again, if you want to galvanize people to vote away or to go and vote in a way that you don't necessarily want them to vote, put out something that becomes objectionable and negative to people in their eyes, and you'll for sure do that. So I would just, again, say that really it should be more about educational piece and not about opinion when the select board is putting out materials that they're mailing out to households. It gets into real sort of dangerous political arenas, of which, as a longtime organizer, if you don't know where it's going to end, and first rule of law in criminal law too, if you don't know where it's going to go, don't necessarily do it. So look at all the end results of what it is that you're doing before you do it.
Well, Dora, if you have any suggestions specifically about the handout, they're certainly welcome. The board won't be acting on them until next Tuesday. So if there's anything specific that you want to point out, we're certainly encourage you to do that. Anybody else who's in attendance got any comments? Excellent. So we'll suspend, I'm not even sure we'll wind up returning to this item. It'll be on the agenda for this coming Tuesday. So Peter, if you could add back to the agenda for the meeting on Tuesday, the 17th of February, proposed charter amendment response. I don't think we need it to be separated into two items, that being select board position and then distribution, but rather just
distribution. And so, Steve, we interrupted you. Do you remember what you were going to say? Resuming the item about pay-as-you-throw.
With regard to enforcement, the Vice
Yeah.
Chair's question, what we find is enforcement for pay-as-you-throw is, as Mr. Moreland had indicated, it's relatively easy. You either have the purple bag or blue bag or orange bag or whatever, or you don't. It is binary. It is not subject to debate or discussion. You either have it or you don't. What we find is the most important part of enforcement is to let people know that you noticed. And so the enforcement, whether you fine people at the beginning, which some communities do, or you just simply leave a notice, which a lot of communities do, the fact that you noticed changes behavior, not necessarily the fine. So what we find is a mandatory recycling program is enormously labor intensive to enforce. Pay-as-you-throw is not. It's either the right bag or it's not. If you let people know you noticed, the next week there's a problem, it's less than 90, more than 93% of the time, you don't have a reoffense. So let people know you noticed, even if you don't fine them, just let them know, and you should be fine. It's relatively easy.
Thank you.
Stephen, if you don't mind staying right there. You've been at this, your company's been at this a while, since 91, I believe. So what pitfalls do you see, a town of our size encountering, implementing pay-as-you-throw? I mean, is there, I don't know if we're making a mountain out of a molehill, or if we're just, being overly cautious or whatever, but.
I don't think it has to be well planned. So you're dealing with 11,000 or so folks who you are going to experience a change. So those 4,000 stops, you'll have to have planned out as to working with the hauler to make sure you do it appropriately. This is day one, this is what day one's going to look like. And then, so for the first couple of weeks, make sure you have, my recommendation is to, even before you get there, so you're going to start, let's say, July 1st, June, for whatever date you're starting, let's back up from there. What we find is an education program beyond 2 months in length, you just lose people. Because people are, what was the most important issue that anybody faced 6 months ago? You don't know, right? So give a solid 2-month education outreach period so people are paying attention, and then get the bags in a reasonable period of time. So back that up from an education and outreach period, make sure it's solid, and you've got that. From there, what's our first day look like? What's our first week look like? And how are we communicating our successes to people? Because the people who are collecting on Friday are paying attention to what's happening in the newspaper with regard to Monday's collection. So making sure that everybody knows this is what the process is going to be. We're going to warn you once, we're going to warn you twice, we're going to do whatever the process is, and then actually implement it. We have seen communities that have said we're not going to do any enforcement for 6 months. And so they start out strong, but then neighbors start paying attention to neighbors. Hey, they're not putting out the bag, and so they don't put it out. So whatever you do, make sure people know, make sure it's consistent. It's really about communication.
Moss?
Yeah. I think one of Kate's, if I want to go a little deeper about her question about enforcement, and it falls in with the pitfalls, is one of the biggest knee-jerk reactions when people hear pay-as-you-throw is, oh man, there's going to be there's going to be trash all over the place. There's going to be illegal dumping. And in a spreadsheet of about 200 Massachusetts towns, each one of the columns was, did you see an increase in illegal dumping? And I'm not sure it's so easy to measure, because there always is illegal dumping, and there always will be. If it's dramatic increase, sure, it's going to be noticeable. And I don't know what Brattleboro is going to experience. We talked about it before in an earlier meeting that the different ways that people say, I don't want to pay for this $2 or $3 bag, and that person wants to skate around the system, how can they do it? And one of the ways may be, or could be, is that they will put it in a commercial dumpster, or on top of a commercial dumpster, or next to, or up at Fairground Road. And I would hazard to say that those types of locations have already had some level of illegal dumping, and I know for a fact they have up at Fairground Road. And so for illegal dumping, there's really nothing else you can do other than, one, lock the dumpster, but once again, you can put the bag right on top of it or beside it. And so when that happens, it's nothing you can do but open up that bag and hope that you find some identifying piece of mail or bank or utility statement, and take that to the police, and they knock on their door and say, this is what we found. And then I think when I've done this in the past, I've been told that often the people are pretty contrite and upfront and say, you know, I did it, and the policeman doesn't fine them. And there are other times when the policeman does issue them a fine that they have to pay, and it's pretty hefty. What Brattleboro experienced, I don't know, but we all have our fingers crossed that it's going to be minimal and not be a big problem.
Other questions from anybody on the board? What I'd like to do, even though the board's now relatively small, is just walk through the 8 recommendations and any other highlights from the memo that Patrick prepared that came via Peter, so that we can make sure that any open issues are at least vetted in this forum. We should be clear that it's a significant change to be moving to pay as you throw. People are going to have to be buying their garbage bags at $2 and $3 a pop in order to have them collected by the town and the town's trash hauler by contract. And we're doing our best to provide as much public information in as public a forum as possible before we make decisions. That's why we set this meeting, so that people will know what's going on. And it's somewhat unfortunate that the meeting is sparsely attended, because this is really our publicity effort to make sure that people know what's coming. And there aren't a lot of other mechanisms we have in order to reach out other than paying to do education work and communicating information through the press. And so we're going to walk through what open issues we're aware of, and we're going to delay decision for a meeting or two to give people an opportunity to come out. But we scheduled this special meeting so people could come talk about it. And so we're presenting the information in public. We've had in the past some questions about bags versus stickers versus bands for identifying that garbage is properly to be collected. Anybody got any questions at this point? It seems to make a lot of sense that we're going to have specific color-coded bags so that the collection folk know what it is that they're picking up. And if it's not properly identified, it's not going to be picked up. It's going to be left on the curb. Ms. Gay? Ms. Joy? Ms. Joy?
I have a question for Steve, and because he's been at this so long, because there are very low income, young mothers and fathers who are just barely getting by. And since he's dealt with these cities in many cities, and there's a few cities that have high level of low incomes. So I would like to hear what he has to say and what he's experienced.
Thank you. I was going to talk about that issue about support for low-income population separate, but Steve, if you want to speak to your experience with that first, that'd be helpful.
Sure. In our experience, the vast majority of cities and towns do not provide a support mechanism for low-income residents, whether that's low-income seniors or low-income with large families or low-income in any variety. The vast majority of instances, a program does not exist to do that. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Number one, it undermines the fundamental fairness of the program, which is to say you pay for what you generate. And so that is one of the primary reasons that we have found. Another reason, and with communities that do provide support programs, like Malden, Massachusetts is one just next door to Boston, they put in a support program and found it to be rarely used, very rarely used. As a matter of fact, I think their program is 4 years old and they're still in the first, what they thought was 9-month order of free bags for residents because people are just not coming to get them. Because most people in the pay to throw program will throw away one bag a week, maybe 5 bags a month when you account for holidays and parties and all that stuff. So it's not usually an enormous expense. as people's behavior changes significantly. And with your organics program, my guess is you'll be doing substantially better than that. So you've done a lot to help lower that expense. Most communities don't have a support program. Those that do have not found it oftentimes well used, but there are communities that do.
Thank you. Anybody, Moss?
Yeah, as Steve's worked with more towns than I have, but I've called numerous towns in Massachusetts and asked them many, many questions, and one of the questions always was whether they did anything for low-income discounted or free bags, and I have the same experience Steve has. Very few towns have it. A couple towns said, oh, I think we do, but I'd have to contact so-and-so. And I was talking to someone who was a head of public works or in the town manager's office, someone who should know. So I took that to mean that they probably really don't have one. I also spoke with Malden, and they gave me the same information. We have a program and it's not used, very little. The only town that I found that has an active program, and I don't know in terms of numbers how well it's used, is Northampton. And I've discussed with this board their approach once before. Obviously, you don't want to give out free bags because the incentive to change your habits in terms of your personal trash stream there's no effect whatsoever. So the board, we've discussed this before, and unless there's an outcry, I think the board is pretty solid behind what most towns do, and is that not offering discounted bags.
Mm-hmm. Peter?
I think it's important to note, too, that the committee listened to the discussion that you had the last time you discussed this. I don't recall whether it was November or December, but when the select board last discussed this matter, you had quite a lengthy discussion about this concern for those in the community who will have a less ability to pick up this expense. And the tentative decision was consistent with what you're hearing again tonight, that there wouldn't be a financial support mechanism, but yet there was some genuine concern about how this might impact such families and individuals in the community. And I thought the committee came up with a really artful way of dealing with that by offering the opportunities for people who want to buy a bag at a time to be able to do that at municipal facilities, and we certainly can offer that very easily at town facilities. So, you know, it is a way to show concern for you know, regarding that stress that'll place on certain households without undermining the purpose of the program.
Can I just ask a question in relation to this? I had this as a question to ask, but it fits perfectly in here. Were there any groups, because you referenced in the memo that you met with a lot of community groups and special interest groups. You didn't say who those groups were specifically. Did any of those groups that you met with express a concern based on their constituents? I mean, I don't know who these groups were.
They all did.
Who were the groups?
The Flat Street, Elliott, Elm Street group, the Continuum Care, which is a group of professionals from various social service agencies, the Brattleboro Housing Authority, Wyndham Housing. Deb Zach was at the Continuum Care meeting, so it wasn't a specific meeting with Wyndham Housing Trust, but meeting with her. And they all express that it's going to be really, really tough for their residents, their low-income residents, particularly families with babies and toddlers who are still in diapers, and that item alone generates a significant quantity of trash and cannot be recycled, cannot be composted. So yeah, there's been, I think, you hear a lot about it, and I think the select board, as this approaches, will continue to hear a lot about it. I think the fact that we've discussed it and most towns don't do it is for some people, is going to be a tough sell for Brattleboro.
Mr.
Have you discussed with family services about them helping these young mothers, young fathers, needing their help if they, the state is allocating them enough money to buy these bags? Because like you said, the diapers are a big thing. And I've seen households where they have 2 or 3 kids in diapers. And they're already living on a below poverty level budget. So I'm just wondering if you've experienced any of that type of communication with towns or you have.
Steve?
You know, I don't, I'm sorry. The only thing I would offer or suggest is that there will continue to be a role for charitable organizations and social service organizations that work with particularly the low-income populations, whether that be, I think you mentioned Family First, or whether that be SEVCA, whether that be faith-based charitable organizations, and their ability to help the populations that they work with. There's always going to be a need for that, and this may be something that, I think continued outreach to those institutions, just so that they see this coming and they understand the implications, both, for themselves, but for the populations they serve. I think, I think the citizenry is going to continue to need support from those organizations.
Steve?
That's certainly been our experience in Fall River, Massachusetts, is one example where the mayor's office made a concerted effort to seek support from community groups. Even with that support, none did volunteer to provide additional funding. I will note, speaking personally, I had 2 in diapers at the same time, and the two in diapers made the difference between a 15-gallon bag a week and a 30-gallon bag for me. So with your scenario, from 15 to 32, there would still be 2 extra gallons, but that's a $1 a week delta. Was my personal experience with 2 average kids. Yeah. Of course, above average kids.
Oh, absolutely.
It's on TV.
It's a given.
I appreciate your opinion.
Well, I also have 2 incredible.
He's not from.
Did anybody hear about my daughters?
Did anybody hear about
Yeah.
my daughter?
In looking on the internet at different towns that have pay-as-you-throw programs, I came across one that had a unique solution for this, and I apologize, I can't remember the name of the town right off. But they had a unique solution for 2 items. One was diapers, and the other was styrofoam. And what they did in that town, they had pay-as-you-throw colored bags like we're proposing and we have in Brattleboro. And if a family with children in diapers put out to the curb a bag, in a clear bag that contained 100% diapers, that was taken away. So obviously it's just the cost of a clear bag, which would be whatever, 25 cents or something, or 50 cents. And if someone had, say they got a shipment and they had a lot of styrofoam packaging or styrofoam peanuts, if they put a clear bag at the curb, could you imagine paying $3 to throw away something that weighs probably not a pound, or weighs a pound?
Right.
That'd be a tough $3 to spend. And so they said if you put out 100% styrofoam in a clear bag, that would be taken as well. I mentioned the clear bag diaper solution to these different social agencies and people who represented low-income groups, and they liked it.
Maybe we would do that too?
I guess it's something to be considered.
It's something.
It's something to be considered, whether
Up to Triple D.
rather right at the beginning or as we have some experience with the program. And it may be something to consider as we have experience with the program, would be my preference, but we'll certainly consider that as part of discussions going forward. I mean, there is, of course, the argument to be made that this is a statewide mandate and a statewide program that impacts many communities beyond Brattleboro. And if there are issues relating to the ability of people with lower incomes to shoulder the additional burden, that a statewide solution is what's called for, rather than one that imposes additional burden at the municipal level. And at this point, until there's additional experience showing that it's a
a challenge that the municipality should respond to, I'm in favor of proceeding the way it's been recommended by the committee. Dora?
Dora Booble with Brattleboro, just to follow up on this discussion, while I love the idea of doing the whole diaper thing. And by the way, peanuts should go to a shipping center because they can be reused, so people shouldn't be putting them in the garbage anyway. But I'm not sure that it would be legal under Act 148 because the requirement is that pay-as-you-throw cover the entire cost, which means that that includes the issue of diapers. And so, I mean, I think in the other communities, are there any other states that have mandated pay-as-you-throw? I mean, besides Vermont, I'm not sure there are. So, I mean, I think when these communities are doing it, it's just within the community, so it's a little hard to compare. Although I love the idea. Styrofoam itself can be recycled. We could figure out a way to do that at solid waste district. I would love it. So as long as I'm up here, there's a couple of things I have just questions about. One is bag size, because I believe a 20-gallon bag is your standard sort of tall kitchen bag, and that's what most people are using right now. So, I mean, obviously we assume that there's going to be less trash, so a 15-gallon bag, but that's what fits in a standard trash can in a kitchen. So it's, you know, I mean, I'm just curious about the bag sizes as far as thinking about that.
I believe the typical kitchen size bag, most manufacturers refer to that as a 13-gallon bag, not a 20-gallon bag.
But, I'm just throwing it out there, so I don't, you know. The whole $2, $3 thing actually is kind of penalizing the person who's actually producing less waste than the person who's producing more waste, because it's a savings to do the bigger bag. But I mean, I understand why that, why that is, but it's just sort of like, just kind of struck me. Now that we're doing this, and more people are going to be doing the compost, and more people are going to be recycling, I have heard from some folks. I do know that there's a lot of people with mobility issues, and this might go to some of the discussions with constituency groups. But people who have difficulty already bringing their trash down the driveway to the place where they're supposed to put it out there, and now they've got multiple things. I mean, I think that's a lot of the reason why a lot of people don't recycle is because they do have issues with trying to figure that out. And then in apartments, the space issue, which is something I've raised a number of times. Just one other thing for the select board. I have no problems with the recommendations made by the committee. They're all good people. But from the perspective of thinking about, have you as a board thought about how you're going to address the conflict of issues and interest issues that might come up from the standpoint of the committee? If this debate gets heated, that could be something that might come up and might be something to be thinking about.
Thank you, Dora. So we've had some discussion in the past about why bags were priced at $2 and $3. Moss, if you could speak to that.
Yeah, I weighed trash bags from Hinsdale, Vernon, Gill, and Bernardston, Massachusetts, all of whom have pay-as-you-throw programs, and all of whom have two sizes bags, the larger and the smaller, very similar to what the committee is proposing. And in each town, without exception, the smaller bag weighed more than half of what the larger bag weighed. This, of course, is averaged out. You could have a small bag that weighed anywhere from 5 pounds to 30 pounds, and a large bag that weighed anywhere from 8 pounds to 40 pounds. But averaging out, which is really the only way we can approach it, the small bag always weighed about 60 to 75% of what a large bag weighed. And I think that is because, and I don't know, but I'm guessing that's because people say, I'm not going to buy a large bag, I'm going to buy the $2 bag, and I'm going to really load it. Because they may find to take that large bag and really load it, it's a struggle to get it out to the curb.
All right, so that's the $2 and $3 bag explanation. That's what we heard before too. Thank you. Dora then inquired about mobility and space-related issues, mobility for taking trash down to the curb and space for storage within apartments. Has there been any consideration of that issue?
I don't think so on the board. I know that the Triple T drivers have a handful of stops with elderly people where they actually, I've been with them, and they go up onto the people's porch and at some number of steps from their truck and pick up their trash. And I do believe that in the ordinance, it says that the town manager can give dispensation for people on getting their trash to the curb. So the mobility issues are addressed in that way. In terms of storage, everybody is going to generate roughly the same amount of stuff, compostables, recyclables, trash, that they do now. Granted, they may, if they haven't been composting and they're going to start with curbside composting, that's an extra container they're going to have in their house. And that could be a challenge space-wise. And I think that is going to have to fall to every individual house and apartment and their shape and the number of spaces and porches and garages and sheds, and they'll have to come up with their solutions. And if I'm continued to be employed by the town on a contracted basis, I'd be happy to visit with anybody in any of their apartments and help them solve that problem.
Yes, ma'am. I don't know your last name.
Oh, I can just say it. It's Francine Valerio, and I just want to say on a positive note that I compost and recycle, and I don't have any garbage. I mean, the only thing I have to put in the garbage are plastic bags, and I really try not to get plastic bags in. So, you know, with the education that Moss is going to be doing and other people will be doing, people can really get together and use a bag, I mean, that don't have diapers. If they're really composting, recycling, you're not going to have a lot of trash. And that's what I have done. So I just want to put that in head, that there are some positive aspects of this, that you won't need as many bags as you think you will.
Thank you, Francine.
You're welcome.
That's right. This week, we didn't even put our garbage out at the house because there was so little that gathered up over the course of the week.
I just want to
James?
say that trash is a subject that people seem to want to talk on and on and on about, and
As we have tonight.
yes, and to share their solutions to various problems. So, and every time, I must have a big T somewhere, because every time I wander around, somebody comes up and has some trash question or problem, and I'm sure you've got the same thing going on. So we might be able to take advantage of this need to discuss and to share, and you know, Moss could develop and the committee could co-host some meetings in various neighborhoods. And I really think education done locally is very important, because you know the town and you know the people. And so forums where, oh, I've got diapers, can we discuss the problem of diapers, where, how did you deal with composting, that kind of thing. There's a lot that we can share by sharing.
Thank you. And, then I'll just respond briefly to your inquiry about conflict of interest. This pay-as-you-throw working group was established however many months ago based upon the recognition that we had a legal requirement that needed to be satisfied. And the committee is staffed by a representative from the hauler, which takes the garbage away, and the recyclables and the compost, by a representative from the Wyndham Solid Waste Management District, by the person with whom we've been contracting to provide local education organizational services, and then 2 citizens and the interim and now assistant town manager. And I don't really see that there's any conflict, and John O'Connor. And so I don't really see that there's any conflict of interest. We have developed a plan to transition to the system that has to be in place by July 1. And based upon the work product that we've got, which is about an inch's worth of paper here today, we've got all the essentials have been covered. And I know that I saw on the local blog claims of conflict of interest. I don't comment on the local blog because it could violate open meeting laws, and our social media policy says that I'm not supposed to. But I disagreed with those claims of conflict of interest because we had a working group to do the work that needed to be done, and it's been accomplished. And Select Board is reviewing it independently. The town manager has reviewed it independently, and people will make that claim, but it looks like great work product to me, and I thank you all for the work that you've done and that you'll be doing going forward. If you need to say something else, on that or anything else, go right ahead. But I don't really want to debate the topic.
I don't really want to have a debate about it. It's pretty clear that there are conflicts of interest. I'm not accusing anybody of anything. I'm just asking what the plan is to address that. And so I didn't ask you if you thought there was a conflict of interest. I was just asking about the plan to address it. So that's, I don't need to get into that anymore. Just one more thing, is there a plan to do more distribution of the containers now that we're rolling this
Yes,
out?
that's in the proposed budget that the select board has.
And then the other items that we have in terms of recommended actions, we talked about the $2 and $3 bags. We've talked about having individual bags available at Town Hall and at the Gibson-Aiken Center, and entering into a 1-year contract with Waste Zero. I do want to thank Steve and the Pay As You Throw group for coming and making the presentation today. When the RFP had first been presented to us in December, the role that the distributor and the then accounting services would wind up playing, the need for that had not been made clear when the information was first distributed, but now that it's been distributed, it's very clear why it's necessary and why the recommendation is being made. So I thank you for coming and for speaking to it. Any questions about that at this point? And then option B, I understand that's, I don't recall exactly what it is.
It's distributing to the stores.
Distributing to the stores is the way to proceed. And then not proceeding with Waste Zero's educational campaign, but rather doing that locally and then going through the ordinance. And what I'm going to suggest is that each of these action items also be on the agenda for this coming Tuesday, and we can vote on them individually and have the first reading of the revised ordinance. So I've not yet had the opportunity to study every word and every line of the proposed changes in the ordinance, but I would ask everybody to go through the ordinance carefully for this coming Tuesday, and we'll have our first reading, and then we'll probably set our second reading for 2 or 4 weeks later, which is the process before we can vote on adoption of an ordinance. Is there enough time to notice it, Peter, Jan, when we do the agenda tomorrow, to have the first reading on Tuesday? That's enough time, enough notice, first reading?
Yes.
Excellent. Peter?
2 quick things. One is that there is a 9th item that doesn't require your action, but we've provided it for information about how we intend to address the parallel collection requirement.
Right.
And there's some related expenses that are identified in the memorandum. So it'll be important, maybe as a ninth item for the agenda for Tuesday, that we just have it on there so that you can advise us if you want us to handle it any differently from how we've described. Otherwise, we're going to proceed as we've described in the memo.
And I think that we can ratify that
That's
approach
fine.
to the parallel collection.
Okay.
Everybody knows what we're talking about?
Yep.
Which is, all right.
So we'll do that. And then my other question, the second item is just a question to you of, there is a lot of material here tonight for you. Since this is going to go onto the agenda again for Tuesday, do you want that repeated or not?
So Dave left his binder, and Jan needs the binders back in order to stock them back up, to
Okay.
fill them up tomorrow. So if you would just carry over both the charter materials and the pay-as-you-throw materials to next week's binder, and we just made the meeting a half hour longer, but that's the way it is.
I think that's helpful, particularly in the spirit of the whole discussion of reducing the waste stream.
Is there any other inquiry from anybody on the board on any other issue relating to pay-as-you-throw?
No, but I just want to clarify something, and I don't even probably have to clarify it. The 8 things that were recommended tonight, we don't have to support every single one of them on Tuesday. Like, we're going to go and vote individually. So if I don't like one of them, I can vote no.
Do you want to tell us which ones you don't like so we can talk about it? That's why we're here.
And this is with all due respect to Moss. I like option C for waste zero. And I'll tell you, that's the public education stuff. That's why I asked, like, Peter, and I couldn't believe he emailed me back at 10:30 last night when I said, can we get this stuff?
You guys have no life.
I know. I went through and I looked at Waste Zero's education proposal, and I looked at Moss's. There wasn't much difference about the things that they were going to do. And I sort of, and again, Moss, this is no disrespect or anything. Waste Zero already has this stuff ready to go. And that's why I wanted to look at it here. The flyers are ready to go. They've produced websites before. I love this thing, trash before, trash after. And I'm not one for reinventing the wheel. And I feel like they are ready to go. They know what they're doing. They've got the pamphlets. We don't have to spend time, designing things. So I personally am in favor of going with option C, because I think, right, that's where I am. I just don't want to reinvent the wheel. And, I spent, as you can see, I've got highlights and sticky notes. I spent a lot of time going from one thing to another. And I really didn't see that there was nothing from the pay-as-you-throw committee that said they didn't like how Waste Zero was going to do the education. So that's just where I am on that. I'm leaning towards
Can I make a
voting yes
brief
on
response?
Hold on, are there other issues that you have concerns about in these recommendations?
No, that's the big
All
one.
right. I think it's useful to talk about it tonight. It could come to decision on Tuesday when there's only 4 board members, and we might not have a majority to act either way.
Right.
And so it could be something that winds up getting drawn out over time. So it's useful to talk about tonight and to put whatever information there might be on the table. Jane, please.
Yes, having been a solid waste coordinator and run several solid waste education programs for the solid waste district and for towns in various places, including nearby in Massachusetts, and having been a vocal opponent of Moss when we went through pay-as-you-throw the first time, and he and I were in catfights on opposite sides of the issue, I have absolutely nothing but respect for the knowledge that he has of this town, of the people that he recruited to come out and vote down the program. And he's, I think, the guy who knows the town really well, knows our local issues really well, has worked with, under Barb, with Cindy Sterling, and has rolled out a local composting program which required a great deal of education and explanation. And so while there is material that is somewhat, probably, I'm guessing, generic, and Moss is local, and so my recommendation is for the guy who knows the local and has been doing the local outreach. And so this can be an ongoing discussion, but that's my strong opinion.
John?
Jane, I totally agree with you about one thing, that we did have this cat fight, and Moss knows that I hold no, secrets about this, and I will definitely give Moss credit where credit is due with the curbside recycling, with the composting, phenomenal job. But the statement that I read a lot in here about being ahead of the curve on a lot of these things really is upsetting to me, because we would have been ahead of the curve by 4 years. And I know it's a sore subject, but we put a lot of time and effort into that. And it was basically yanked out from underneath us. So I really have a hard time with that. But Waste Zero has got a phenomenal program here. And I just think that it would be nice to keep it in-house, to keep everything under one roof. And I agree with Kate. Lately, we haven't agreed, but on this one, I do. And it's no reflection on Moss. It's just that I think that they have a program that's ready to go, that is complete, that is concise. They can get us. Again, I don't want to say that we're making a mountain out of a molehill, but I just, after the amount of time we've spent on this, I think it's going to be an easy transition. I don't think it's going to be this giant headache that there's going to be trash everywhere, that there's going to be people that can't get their bags out, that there's, we're shoving. I just think it's going to be Vernon. It happened very quickly. It worked well. And so I just don't think there's going to be this giant headache. I know we have some work to do with getting the word out again, but I just don't think it's going to be that difficult.
Well, since we've begun the discussion on the merits of this inquiry, I personally believe strongly in the importance of having somebody local doing the education work. I think that the boots on the ground experience makes a big difference and is an important aspect of how we're going to proceed to do this effectively. John, that I disagree and have disagreed with you for a number of years about the notion that we did sufficient work in order to be ready to implement this program before, because I totally, absolutely disagree. There had been general discussions about the possibility of moving the town to pay-as-you-throw a number of years ago, but none of the detailed implementation work had yet been accomplished. And if I can finish,
Yep,
please.
okay.
If I can finish, please.
I will let you.
I've heard you say that you think the work was done. I respectfully disagree. I respectfully disagree that it's been done now and that it's going to be an easy and a smooth transition. And I personally am in favor of having somebody doing the work who's been doing the work at the town level through the various stages in increasing recycling and then moving towards composting. And it's going to take 3 votes from select board members to make a decision one way or another. And whether there will be 3 votes at the next meeting or not, it's difficult to say. But
I know that there's 2 votes in favor of Waste Zero, and I don't know what the 2 absent members have to say, but I'll be voting in favor of Moss doing the work.
Well, to respectfully disagree, you weren't on the board when I was on the board. So you don't know, you were not with me. You were not on the, yes, oh, yes, you were. So there's one.
You guys gonna fight or can I say
No,
something?
I'm not gonna fight about it, but I'm just gonna say that there was a lot of work done. And that's, you know, that's where we can have a disagreement, that's fine. But again, I still will stay to my statement that I think it's going to be an easier transition than we're making it out to be.
I haven't said that there wasn't work done. What I've said is that the
I know.
detailed implementation work was not done at the time and still hasn't been done.
You can have that opinion.
Can I say one more
just
thing?
want to weigh in and agree with David that as a member of the Solid Waste Committee at the time and one of the leaders of the pack of pro-pay-as-you-throw people, we had a general outline. We had figured out the costs, but how the implementation, we had not gone out to bid. Waste Zero was one of the people, one of the companies involved at the time, but we had not gone down a road nearly as detailed. That was waiting to happen after the vote at town meeting, and the committee was ready to roll out the next steps, but we did not have the details on the shelf. We had intentions, but not specifics.
Can I just,
Kate?
can I go back to what my original thing was? I'm not saying we don't need education. What I'm saying is, I looked at what Moss proposes and what Waste Zero proposes, and it's the same thing. It's doing mailings, wait a second, it's doing mailings, it's doing videos. I went through and checked everything. Maybe there's, and I shouldn't probably bring this up, I don't know if there's a way to have Waste Zero do something and Moss do the local education piece. I see no reason why Moss has to sit down and design something that's gonna look like this when we already have it. That's my point. I don't know why Moss has to sit and develop a website when we have people who develop websites. You know, I don't see why Moss has to be the one stapling 12, booklets together when they have one. That's my point. It has nothing to do, and maybe there's stuff that we can have a local person do, because, they have this. I think this is great. I think this is great. And why Moss, you have to go and reinvent the wheel to make something like this when they've already got it. That's my point. Because it wasn't like the pay-as-you-throw, or Moss came with something that says, I don't like what Waste Zero is doing. If you look, you're each saying you're gonna do the exact same thing. And yes, it might benefit to have a local person, be at the meeting. I mean, Waste Zero is very clear. They'll come to a community meeting and explain the process. But that doesn't mean we can't have Moss at the meeting, or if Moss is at the meeting, doesn't mean Waste Zero can't be at the meeting. What I'm trying to say is they have the resources and the knowledge and the things that are available, and maybe there's a way we can have both. That's my point. I just don't think we need to reinvent the wheel. If they have web developers, why are you developing a website, or why are you making videos? I don't know if I'm being clear what I'm saying. I'm just saying there's been nothing between Moss's proposal and Waste Zero's proposal that's any different. It's the same things, but to me it's why are we reinventing the wheel when we have, and maybe there's a way for Moss to do some of the local coordinating and Waste Zero to do everything that they're gonna do. That's my point. Not how much education we need. I'm totally into it. It's just that I just see that there's gonna be efforts that Waste Zero has already. And it just seems ridiculous to me to reinvent a flyer when we've got one. I mean, basically that's what I'm saying.
Basically, that's what she's
Yeah.
saying.
I mean, it is.
No offense to Steve or Waste Zero, but we as a town, to do our own videos, to put our own people in it, that gives us power, that gives us responsibility for each other. And it makes us look at those videos or look at our flyers with our face, our trash, and say, okay, we need to really own up to this. We're right there. It's not just a flyer, it's not just a website that is duplicated over and over. It's us. That's what makes our town so special. Excuse me.
Any other comments on this for right now? Well, it'll be a top, Moss?
I'm not going to try to sell myself right now, but I want to point out one thing that happened when pay-as-you-throw was passed by representative town meeting, I think almost 5 years ago. There was also $40,000 appropriated to hire someone for a 12-month period, and that person was going to do the detail work that Jane is saying that they had not yet gotten to, and that we have been working towards on this committee for quite some time, and there's still a lot of detail work left to go. And so that's a little bit of history. And I think one thing that the board should keep in mind is that if for a community that pay-as-you-throw is a brand new thing and they don't have the history that Brattleboro has of going up to the brink of pay-as-you-throw once, and then a year of Cindy Sterling and I working on the recycling rate, and then the implementation of the curbside compost pilot, and then taking that town-wide, and these 6 months before us, we are well situated to go right along with this path we've been following. I suggest with my role, and we're not a town that like I'm sure numerous towns that Steve has helped with. Waste Zero is a really, pay-as-you-throw is really a brand new concept and a brand new program, and it has a staff that does not have, the town does not have a staff or a history of having been working towards that like Brattleboro's have.
Any further discussion on pay-as-you-throw? Next item on the agenda is to set the informational town meeting. The proposal is to schedule Brattleboro's representative town meeting, informational town meeting for Monday, March 16, with the doors to open at 6 o'clock, caucuses to begin at 6:30, and the meeting to be convened at 7 o'clock. Traditionally, the meeting has been convened on Wednesday or Thursday. Wednesday?
Wednesday.
On Wednesday, 10 days before town meeting, but that didn't work because of scheduling conflicts. It needs to be held within 10 days before the representative town meeting. So we have selected March 16, Monday. I move to schedule the informational town meeting on Monday, March 16, with doors to open at 6 p.m., caucuses at 6:30, and the informational meeting to begin at 7 o'clock at the Academy School. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed or abstaining? That carries 3-0. Is there any further business to come before the meeting? We're ready for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
We have a motion to adjourn. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed or abstaining? That carries 3-0. Thank you, members of the press. Thank you, everybody who attended and participated. Good night.